Hi everyone, it's Christy here from KP Creatives with another video for Two Scrapbook Friends. Today we're going to make a very clean and simple Father's Day card. We're going to use this great stencil from My Favorite Things. They have a couple of different versions of this stencil. This is the watercolor wash. It does come with the outline stencil and the insert. We're not going to use the insert today, so I'm going to set that off to the side. We're going to use this great outline, and we're going to use Distress Oxides to do some ink blending. You could also use Distress Inks for that. I don't have the Distress Inks in my collection, so I'm using the oxides. Or you could use any inks that are great for blending. Gina K, Catherine Pooler, Pink Fresh, any of those types of inks you have in your collection will work for this type of project. So I've got my blending brushes from Tailored Expressions, and we're going to be using some of the latest oxides that have come out in Tim Holtz' new collection of oxides that have been being released over the last, I guess, couple of years now, maybe. So we've got Speckled Egg, Rustic Wilderness, and Crackling Campfire. And I'm going to be using this great new tool, the ink stand, which you can get at Two Scrapbook Friends. It is a fantastic tool that you can keep on in your craft workspace, and you can put your ink pads in it, and then they stay in one place when you are blending. You know, sometimes when we're blending, we're putting our blending brushes into the ink pads and the pads are moving all around on our surfaces. And you'll see when this is in use today, that does not happen with the ink stand. So it's a great tool to have in your collection. For our sentiment, we're not going to be doing any stamping today. I'm actually going to be using these great new foiled sentiments from Pink Fresh. You can get this package. It has tons of sentiments in gold foil or silver foil. So all of them are listed on the back here. You can check the website and you can expand this picture so you can see which sentiments come with, but they are great all-purpose sentiments. Some for like thinking of you, thank you, birthdays, all kinds of great stuff. So I've picked out a few that I think could work really well for Father's Day. So I'm going to pop this up again at the end of the video so you can check the list of supplies that we're going to use in today's project. I've got a piece of Bristol Smooth cardstock, and I'm going to use some of the Pixie tape from Thermal Web. I'm really enjoying this Pixie tape. It is a great low tack adhesive. So I'm going to put a little bit on the back and stick that down to my media mat. And then I'm going to take the stencil and get this positioned just about like that so that we're in the middle. And we're going to take this Pixie tape and just tape it down to our work surface. You could use any type of washi tape for this because it's actually not touching paper. So I'm not going to get too fussed about having it. You don't have to worry too much is what I'm trying to say about the tape. So any washi tape will work because you're just sticking the tape down to the actual stencil, not your paper. So I'm going to get started here with the Crackling Campfire. I actually haven't used this ink very much. So you can see here, I don't have my hands touching the ink stand at all. It's just sitting right on my media mat, and I'm moving my brush pretty firmly on the ink pad, and you can see that it's moving slightly, but it's not like going all over the place. So let me do the same thing without being in the ink stand. Not really effective, right? So this allows you to keep one hand free, which I really like. So a great tool to have in your collection. Just going to grab a piece of paper towel. That didn't really work. There we go. Grab the paper towel with purpose. I'm going to dab a little bit of the ink off, and I'm going to try and get a bit of a diagonal blend here with our three colors. Do I want to do diagonal? Yeah, I think I do. Okay, so let's start here. Now, if you are new to ink blending, I highly recommend trying the oxides to blend because they blend really easy. When you're ink blending, there are a few things that matter. The ink matters, the paper matters, and your blending tool matters. And it can be different for all different kinds of ink. You really have to, it's one of those things that you have to keep trying to make sure that you're getting what works for you in your crafty workflow. So I find for me, for Distress Oxides, the Bristol Smooth cardstock, a blending brush from Tailored Expressions, and the Distress Oxides, perfect combo for my ink blending. Sometimes when you're starting out ink blending, you might think, oh, you know, I just want to start out with a nice light blend, and that's fine. You can absolutely do that. But if you want full coverage blends like we're going for today, one of the things you have to remember is you've got to have a lot of ink down on your paper. The more ink you've got down on your paper, the more it's going to blend together. So, you know, sometimes I think we get a little nervous. We go, oh, you know, I really should have a lighter hand. And, you know, sometimes that's true. Sometimes that really works. If you want a fade technique or something like that, you do want a light hand and you don't want to soak your paper. But in something like this, I am not going to be shy at getting the ink onto this paper. So my stencil shifted just, actually my paper shifted just a little bit there. So I'm just gonna get that back into place. Perhaps the low-tech adhesive wasn't the best thing to use to put the paper to the media mat. So that's okay. We'll get in there, and I'm sure just a little bit outside the lines, I'm not too worried about. So I'm getting these colors blending together. I'm going to go back in with the Crackling Campfire in a few, well, at the end, we'll go back over each area. So I'm going to stop there with the Rustic Wilderness, and we're going to go into Speckled Egg. Now, as I mentioned, I'm making a Father's Day card today, so I wanted the card to be kind of neutral colors, which is why I decided to go with these three. So now I'm coming in with Speckled Egg. Great blue. I thought it would go nicely with the Rustic Wilderness. I'm gonna get a lot of it. This color is lighter, so I wanna really get my brush soaked and get it working into the paper here. So you can see on that last pass how the blend started to work itself together. And that's really because we're getting more ink down on that paper. So it really, you know, sometimes, I know when I started blending, I was really tentative and I didn't put a ton of ink down. And, you know, watching other people's videos and seeing their ink blending process has really taught me that, you know, don't be afraid. Get the ink on the paper. That's what it's for. That's why we love it. So I know I still have a bunch of Rustic Wilderness still on this brush. I don't like how I got a little bit higher up here with the Speckled Egg, so I'm not going to reload any ink on the brush. I'm just going to go over it with what I've already got on there. And that should be enough to let me smooth this out. So just going right over that blending area. And I think that's great. So now I'm going to come back with the Crackling Campfire. We're going to bring it a little bit more down into the Rustic Wilderness. So this is the other thing. If you're new to ink blending, don't be afraid to go back over your blended areas. Totally okay. These blending brushes are fantastic, and you can go back and forth and really get the type of blend that you're looking for. So this Crackling Campfire ink is super juicy. So I'm not sure if it's showing in the video, but it is super slick and juicy. So I'm actually going to have to go back in again with the Rustic Wilderness, and I might need a little bit more ink this time on my brush. So let's see here. We can get that blending a little more. That's blending a little better here. So I will say the Crackling Campfire to Rustic Wilderness, probably not my most favorite blend that I've ever done. But you know what? It's always good to try out new colors and see how they work together. So it will be great for this card. The other thing that I really like about when you're ink blending, especially with Distress Oxides or any inks that are reactive with water, is you can always spray some water and it makes it look totally different. You could stencil over top with some of the pastes you have in your collection. It'll make it look totally different. That's a really great tip if you're, again, new to ink blending and you don't like the blend that you got. Pop a stencil on top and blend over that with, you know, white pigment ink or something like that. And it really does change the look of your project. So you can see that stencil did move a little bit, and I've got a little bit there that went outside the line. I think that is okay. It adds a little bit of character to this, and I am not going to get fussed about it. I also got a little heavy-handed with the ink there, so we have a little tiny bit outside. But again, this is supposed to look like a watercolor wash, so I am totally okay with those little imperfections. That is a-okay. So let's grab a couple of sentiments, again, from the foiled sentiment collection from Pinkfresh Studio. I grabbed a couple out of the collection that I thought would be appropriate for Father's Day. So I wanted to play around with a few of these to see, you know, what I thought worked, what looked good on my card project. And I'm going to be using a standard A2 size card, probably a portrait. So I thought I would try a couple of these sentiments to see what worked well. And we might even be able to cover up some of these areas that we might not be totally thrilled with. So I think in this case, the I can always count on you to brighten my day might be a little too big. So I'm going to set that aside. We've got today is all about you. So I could put it right in the middle, or I could offset it so that it's a little bit off into the corner. Kind of like that, actually. Today's all about you. We've got enjoy your special day. You can see this is starting to bother me now. I'm really trying to cover up that area. So enjoy your special day. I really love this sentiment. Thank you for helping me grow. Ooh, I think that might be the winner, actually. Let's try the today is all about you one more time. See, this is where it'd be nice to be live so you guys could vote. Do you like today is all about you, or thank you for helping me grow? I think we're going to go with today is all about you. And I'm not sure if you saw, but when I moved the sentiments, because I'm using Distress Oxides, these inks stay wet a little longer. And I dragged some of the ink down onto the white part of my paper. So if you do not have one of these already, the Mono Sand Eraser, you have got to get one of these in your collection. And I'm going to show you live how it works. So I've got my cardstock here. Again, this is Bristol Smooth cardstock. I'm taking my sand eraser and I'm going right over top of those areas where I had the ink smudge. And you are going to see it's going to remove it from the paper. And I just got another ink smudge on there. Goodness. That is one thing when you work with Distress Oxides, you have to remember that they stay wet longer than dye inks. So this is a great reminder for me because I messed it up a couple of times. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is get out my Tim Holtz paper trimmer. And I'm going to cut this down a little bit. And I'm going to try and be very careful to not get ink anywhere where I don't want it. So we're going to make a standard A2 size card. So I just want to cut a little bit, 1/8 of an inch off of each side so that I can get a nice white border and some white space on our finished card project. So the panel that I was working with was 4¼ by 5½ inches. I'm cutting it down to 4 inches, which is the cut we're making right here. And we're cutting it down to 5¼ There we go. So we've got a nice panel here. Get those off to the side. Take away the heavy machinery, and I'm going to get this down on a card base before we actually adhere the sentiment. So I've got a standard A2 size card base here. So again, 4¼ by 5½. This is a 8½ by 11 sheet of the Neenah Solar White Classic Crest 110, cut down the middle and scored at 5½. So we are going to get some foam tape on the back of our little card panel here. And I'm just going to grab some scissors. This foam tape will give us some nice dimension on our card project. And it's not too super thick, so it stands up nice and we get a little bit of dimension, which creates a little bit of a nice shadow, especially when we're using white on white, which I really like. All right, now I'm gonna get a little bit of the Gina K Connect liquid glue, and I'm gonna put that on top of the foam tape just so we get a little bit of wiggle room when we are adhering the card panel down to the card base. Make sure I've got it the right way that I want it. This just gives us a little bit of wiggle room. My secret weapon ruler is actually not within my grasp right now. So I'm going to have to kind of wing this one and try and get it as straight as I can onto the final card. And that looks good. All right, so you can see we've got a couple of little ink splatters here. I'm going to bring back the Mono Sand eraser, and the reason I have those is because I actually have ink on my mat, which I did not realize. So let's get rid of that. This is sort of becoming a video of, you know, what not to do when, when you're ink blending. But you know, no matter how long you've been crafting, you can always, you know, things can always go not quite as you expected. And you know what? That's why we're crafty people, because we can problem solve and get ourselves out of these jams. Okay, so I'm going to work with that. I actually like some of these other organic splatters. That is totally okay. So now we're going to get this sentiment. I'm going to bring back the Gina K Connect liquid glue. This liquid glue is great. It's very similar to the Lawn Fawn liquid glue. I think you can also get one from My Favorite Things at Two Scrapbook Friends. And these glues are fantastic adhesive. They work great, super strong, and they dry clear. So they are fantastic for popping sentiments down, working with gems, anything like that. So just going to wiggle this around a little bit. I kind of want to break out of the watercolor wash a little bit. And we'll just let that set up. Today is all about you. Fantastic. So as I'm looking at this, I'm actually sort of changing my mind about one thing, and it's that I think I should actually spray some water on the watercolor wash because we have a little bit of the bleeds. And although I like it, I think it would look better if I actually sprayed it with a little bit of water. So I'm going to do that. Again, this is not what you should normally do. You should, before you adhere your sentiment, pop the water on, but you know what? Here we are. So what I'm going to do is grab a piece of scrap paper and I'm going to put it around just to cover the sentiment as best as I can. I don't care if the water gets on the actual card base. We're not like soaking this with water. It's just spraying it so that we get a little bit of an effect using the Distress Oxide. So if you've never used Distress Oxides with water, this is going to be a great little demo to show you what happens. So what I'm going to do is spray from probably about a foot high off of my table, and I'm going to spray once all the way down. So I'm just going to pull the trigger all the way down to here quickly. And that's going to give a fine mist. So that's what we're going to do. So ready? 1, 2, 3. And we've got a nice spray there onto our ink blended piece. And you can see the water droplets are starting to react with the ink that we've got on our panel. And I think that just gives it a little bit more of a rustic look, given the other errors that I made on this card. I think that fits. I'm actually going to do it one more time. So again, I'm about a foot off my table. I'm going to spray once. And I think that is going to be great. We got a lot of variation in the size of the water droplets. So I'm going to lift up the piece here, and we protected our sentiment. So something worked in this card project, which is great. So I also like that, you know, this is a card from my dad, and I didn't want to add sequins or anything like that. That's not really my dad's style. So I think adding the water actually achieves, you know, a little bit of interest, makes it, you know, a little more pleasing to the eye, and it doesn't look it doesn't look as random. So I think that's a lot of fun and adds some really great interest to the background that we have. So that is the card project for today. Here are the supplies that we used. Again, the trio of Distress Oxides, the watercolor wash stencil, and those great foiled sentiments. So if you don't have those foiled sentiments in your stash, highly recommend grabbing them to have in your collection. And just so you can see how great the foiling is on the sentiments, it really is quite good. And you can see that those water droplets are drying. We're getting some nice variation in our ink blend. So hopefully you were able to learn a lot of what not to do when you're ink blending, but hopefully you also learned some tips along the way. Ink blending is one of my favorite things to do. You know, it's one of those great go-to techniques that if you're not having, you know, if you don't have a lot of crafty mojo, ink blend something, right? You don't have to make anything out of the card or the panel that you ink blend. You can just build up a stash of ink blends. It's a lot of fun, and you really get to know your tools well, and the products that you have when you try out different ink blends. So highly encourage you to play around with that. So thanks for sticking with us to the end of this video. If you did like it, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you next time.